Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webcast. Glad to have you on this morning. I am your host, Jennifer Wicks, here from the Chancellor's Office, coming to you live from Central Station U Studio, right here on the 4th floor. Please do come join us and visit us here in the studio when you come to the Chancellor's Office next. We'd love to kind of show you around, show you what we do here. So I am coming to you from the 4th floor, as I said, and we're happy to have you on board the CSU's Got Talent webcast today. This is all about presentation skills. We have a fantastic presenter coming to us live from London today, in fact, to bring us these important tips to really help nail the presentations, nail your live skills, and bring you some feedback as well, some ways to get some professional feedback in your presentations. So really excited to dive into this webcast today. And if you have a chance, take a moment, share this presentation link out to maybe your colleagues who may want to join us as well today. It's not too late for them to join. Nobody needs a login ID. This is just an open link, and we'd love to have more people join as well. So please feel free to fill out some of these polls on the screen we have for you. We're getting to know our audience each time we do our webcast here from Central Station U Studio. Which of the following areas do you need help with the most? You can select one, select many. I'm so glad to see some of these votes coming in. We'll broadcast these results here so you can take a look. And also poll number 2, what scenarios are most relevant to you? Select again one or many. And let's broadcast these results as well so we can take a look at those live numbers coming in. So today's presentation, we're going to have mostly questions at the end, so please do continue to type your questions and comments as Ariel, our presenter, moves through the content today. And we will have a PDF for you to download at the very end, and also a very special gift for you at the very end as well. So you want to stay with us until the last part of the presentation when you'll have access to this free gift that Ariel has been so generous to bring and offer. So let's take a look here. Which of the following areas do you need help with the most here? It looks like primarily we're coming into delivery style. Okay, good. So that's very helpful for us to know. Having a powerful opening is another one, and I know Ariel is going to be talking about that specifically. And a logical sequence of content. Okay, great. Those are the top 3. Poll number 2 here, what scenarios are most relevant to you? Okay, it looks like presenting to decision makers in executive presence. That's really the leading one, followed by presenting remotely. So on webcasts, things like this, or even a conference call, perhaps. And third, presenting as a team. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for participating in those questions. We're going to move on to learn a little bit more about how we hold our analytics here, how we capture our savings for all the webcasts that we do. This is our Footprint Savings Pod, and I'm going to go ahead and send a note to your computer right now. If you could fill this out just briefly, putting in the address from where you're joining us today, your campus most likely, and then also letting us know the number of attendees who are joining with you today. A lot of times we can multiply the savings by how many attendees if it's not just you sitting alone at your computer. So at the very end, if you could put save and close once you put your data in there. It'll bring us back to the main screen here where we capture all of our savings. It looks like for this particular webcast, we're saving over 10,000 pounds of CO2. So that calculates whether you're flying or driving to our location here. And also over 10,000, almost 11,000 US dollars. Also almost 20,000 round-trip miles. So thank you very much for updating your information and helping us with our analytics here, our savings. So if this is your first time to our series, CSU's Got Talent, we here at System-Wide Professional Development are presenting the series of live online webcasts, basically highlighting the talent that we have across the CSU system. And this particular presentation today was a presentation given to us here at the Chancellor's Office, and we wanted to bring this to you, this valuable content, and also information about how you can upgrade your presentation skills through some feedback, some very valuable feedback, which we're going to learn a little bit more about today as well. So today, joining us from London, Ariel Halevi is going to be coming on in just a moment. He is a founding partner of Viomar, Israel's largest training and consulting firm for communication competencies, and a vendor of choice among leading global brands. Driven by the passion for education, innovation, and technology, Ariel also co-founded How Did I Do?, Viomar's online presentation analysis tool, which enables individuals and organizations to measure and improve their impact in a quantifiable way, using a combination of automated, peer-to-peer, and expert feedback. I'm going to switch on over to the presentation layout here, and I'm going to introduce Ariel. Ariel, if you could bring your camera on and join us here. Wonderful. Can you hear me okay? Make sure I can hear you as well. Okay, great. Absolutely. Well, welcome. Welcome to CSU's Got Talent. Thank you for joining us all the way from across the pond. So we've learned a little bit about you, but if you could share a little bit more, Ariel, about your background in presenting, that would be a great way to kind of start.
Absolutely. Well, I should start by saying that I started late. I was a very late bloomer, so I didn't actually start speaking properly until I was 3 years old. But then my parents said I didn't shut up ever since. So really I got into this whole art of communication in college. I met my very good friend and current business partner, Slavi, in the competitive debate club of the Interdisciplinary Center, which is the first private college in Israel. And then we basically started competing all around the world. We did very well, and we noticed that there was something systematic about our success and about the success of other people that we kept meeting in the circuits all over the world. And so a few years into that, we had this idea of combining what we love to do, which is education and business, into a company that would basically try at least to decode some of the patterns that make successful speakers successful. And that's what we've been doing since. It's been about 13, almost 14 years since we started the company, have about 80 employees working for us today. And we are now taking on the next challenge, which is to try and see if we can shatter some of the age-old paradigms that have to do with communication skills being something that people believe it's, you can't measure it, it's a soft skill process, you have to do it in person. We'll talk about that later, but that's our key focus today.
Well, excellent. Well, with that, people are probably wondering why Jerry Seinfeld is on the screen. I'll hand the baton over to you.
Okay.
What's that?
You never really need a good excuse to somehow relate to Jerry Seinfeld. That's a good universal rule.
That's true. He kind of weaves into everything. That's true.
Well, the reason Jerry Seinfeld is how I open this presentation is because there's a very, very interesting statistic that we came across a good few years ago where a very, very widespread survey was conducted among thousands of people here in the United States. And they were asked, what are you most preoccupied with? What troubles you? What are you most afraid of? Is it failure, And really what was amazing in the survey that the fear of death and illness only came second. And the first thing that people ranked as the most important fear they deal with was the fear of public speaking, which I always find incredible. About a week after that was published, Seinfeld came up with a stand-up and basically said that according to this research, if for some horrible reason somebody close to you dies and you have to give the eulogy at the ceremony, according to this research, you'd rather trade places with that individual. So I love that, how he deals with humor in that way. So, that's why today our session will be about one of the most important rituals that you need to know how to go through well in today's world, which is how to build and deliver a successful presentation. So what we did for today, we can talk about this for hours and hours, but we basically created a short list of tips and recommendations, and I'm happy to see the survey results from the beginning of our session today because we will be talking to at least a few of those points. I will also mention that there is a much more comprehensive document in the presentation format that will be available to anybody in this session today. But for the purpose of presenting, we like to keep the documents slim, and I'll relate to that as well. So today, that's what we're talking about, the tips for building a winning presentation. And why don't we go to the very first one, which is giving your presentation the right title. And the reason I start with this is because this is one of the most overlooked aspects of presentations. People think that that first slide of their presentation is really not that important, that the core content comes later, there's a table of contents, that's what I'll present, what I'm going to talk about. And this is a massively wasted opportunity. You need to constantly reinforce the desire and the motivation that your audience has to listen to you. And that starts pretty much, aside from something called the grace period, which I'll talk about in a minute, it starts with your presentation title. Your presentation title has to capture the imagination, and it has to touch upon a value or an unanswered question that your listeners are most interested to hear. And this is, by the way, much, much more important as the people you present to hold a higher ranking office. And so for those of you who all answered, presenting to senior decision makers, your buy-in from your audience starts with this title. And so here's what you should do. You need to pretend that you do not have a captured audience. What you need to do is you need to imagine that the people you are presenting to actually are given a choice, just like happens in a lot of conventions where there's a breakout session and you can go to different sessions that are happening simultaneously. And a lot of people will register in advance, but the way they'll do it is they'll look at the program agenda and they'll see what are the different sessions that are taking place simultaneously. Now, they don't have a lot of information about those sessions. What they usually have is a title. It's in the program. And then if the title and that brief description is relevant to them, they'll choose to walk into that room. You need to try to get your audience to choose to walk into your room, so to speak, starting with your presentation title. And that's why I give these 3 points. Pretend that you're part of a breakout session. Consider that you're going to write something down in a program, and then make it so that they want to pick your room. Now, usually that title will relate, like I said, to a challenge or to a question or to a value that your audience wants. So why don't we take a quick look at a bad example and a good example of a presentation title. So this example actually comes from real life. One of the customers that we were working with brought us in to help them with the annual sales kickoff that happens many times, that you fly in the sales team from all over the world. And they had an issue. They said, look, Ariel, we want to talk to them about changing the strategy that they're currently applying. Our salespeople have fallen into a comfort zone, and they are constantly focusing all of their efforts on upselling more and more services to existing clients they already have a relationship with. But we as a company, we want to bring on new customers. We want to expand our market share. But we're afraid they're going to resist. We're afraid they're going to come up and argue with us the dilemma of the more effort you put on bringing in new customers, the less effort you're actually investing in your existing relationships. So we wanted to show that there was actually a way to do that without compromising what they didn't want to compromise. So a bad way to give a title to that session would have been, 2014 Sales Strategy Summit or 2014 Sales Strategy Presentation. But that doesn't say anything. You see that title, you know what we're going to talk about, here and there. It's very generic and it doesn't invite you. So we decided to choose a different content. We took a title, From Farming to Hunting, because farming is what they call it in the business world when you're upselling to existing customers, and hunting is what you do when you go on and you bring fresh blood, so to speak, into your customer base. And then we added a subtitle, which was how to bring on new clients without sacrificing your existing accounts. Because we knew that that was a dilemma they were facing, we took it on directly, and it's almost like we're telling them, listen, there is a way to do these two things, and here's the unwritten contract between us. If you listen to me, I will give you the answer to this question. And that is a good test of a good title, where you are making an unwritten contract and they're shaking your hand and saying, okay, I'm interested. Now, they're not going to tell you they're interested for the next 40 minutes. They'll tell you, I'm interested for the next 2 minutes, and then you have to buy in their attention all over again. So this is the importance of building a good presentation title, giving it a good name, which means you also have to really understand what is the core value you're here to deliver. And the more senior the people you talk to, the more important that is. Now, there is one thing that you need to do before you actually show this slide to your audience. It's very similar to what I did today. You need to actually capture your audience's attention before you actually deliver the promise. Because if you're delivering a promise to an audience that's not listening, that promise's impact is reduced dramatically. So in my next slide, I'm going to show you a graph that demonstrates the behavior, the attention behavior of an audience universally, and then how you can leverage that pattern to your advantage. This is what you're looking at here. It's called the audience attention graph. Well, as you can see, the y-axis represents the level of attention your audience will have at any given moment. The x-axis represents how long you've been speaking. You'll notice that there's a dotted line running parallel to the x-axis. That's called the attention threshold. What that line represents is an imaginary barrier that if your audience is lower than that barrier, effectively they're not in attention, and it doesn't matter what you say, they're not really capturing it or internalizing it. Now, some of you wrote in the survey that delivery style is very important to you. So I wasn't planning on spending so much time on this slide, but because that answer came up so dominantly, I will review the slide slightly longer. What you have here is a rising and decreasing, a fluctuating attention span. That is not something that you can control. But what you can learn from it is that there are parts in your presentation where you need to deliver core or primary content, always when you're above the attention threshold. And then when you're below the attention threshold, you need to use something called an attention booster. Now, an attention booster is defined as anything that will stimulate your audience's attention by shattering the standard stimulation in the room. It's something unexpected. It could be a question that you ask your audience. It could be movement on stage. It could be changes in your voice and the emphasis you put on words or how quickly you speak. It could be an interactive process with your audience or a role-playing situation. It could be a multimedia piece. What you need to do in order to improve your delivery style is always approach your presentation as a combination of delivering important content that generates value to your audience while also delivering stimulation that are constantly triggering your audience's senses to pay attention to you. Now, the first and most important attention booster is called a grace period, and you can see that on the left of this graph. And as you will see, the grace period is that initial period of time in your presentation where your audience is still not in attention, primarily because you haven't gotten started yet and they're still taking their seats and they're still checking their phone, or maybe you're the second or third presenter and they're still thinking about somebody that spoke before you. So unless you're the President of the United States or a celebrity that people are very excited to hear, like most of us, we're all mostly mortal, you have to assume that the first moments of your presentation are moments where the audience is not fully in attention, and therefore you don't want to start off with your opening slide, which already carries important content, the promise of the value of the presentation. You want to start with something before that that will capture the audience's attention and maybe give them a little indication of what we're going to talk about today. But only once they're above the attention threshold will you actually start delivering primary or core content. So how do you do it? What different types of grace periods do we have? So number one, you can start with a very powerful statistic, a number. That number should represent something, a phenomena or a trend that your content is relating to. Okay? So I could have started today, instead of using a story, which is also a great way to start, I could have started with a number. I could have said 95% of people were answered that they are afraid more of public speaking than they are of death. Right? I could have started that way. Or I could have started with a quote or an open-ended question to your audience. Now, there are two types of questions you can use. One is a question where you actually expect your audience to respond. It could be with shouting out answers or just raising their hand if they have done something that you're asking about. But that can be dangerous because if you open up with a question and your audience doesn't respond, you're left hanging too early in the presentation, and that's risky as far as establishing your status to be the one presenting to them. So unless you are sure that your audience is going to cooperate with you, you might want to use a rhetorical question where you shoot out a question that captures everybody's attention, they're interested in the answer, then you deliver the answer, and then you make a connection to the name of your presentation, which we already discussed. Now, I've also listed here some visual stimulations. It could be a picture, it could be a prop. A lot of times we work with entrepreneurs who are presenting as part of an event where a lot of entrepreneurs can showcase their venture. That's called a demo day. So they'll come up with a device of some sort if they have something to show, because people are curious, what is the presenter holding in their hand? But the common denominator of all of these openings is that they are meant to capture your audience's attention before you start delivering core content. Now, you don't have to be an actor, and you don't have to have a flair for the dramatic. If you're a softer speaker, if you're a little bit more of an introvert, and you don't feel comfortable starting with the whole drama, start with a quote. Start with a regular old story. You don't have to come up on stage blazing. Whatever it is, choose something that you feel comfortable with. Okay, moving on to our third tip, creating the right slide title. Now, this is not too dissimilar to the idea I spoke about earlier when I discussed the importance of giving your presentation the right name, only here we're applying the same methodology per content unit in your presentation. So here's what I want you to think about. When you're choosing a slide title, imagine that the audience cannot see the rest of the content included in that slide. Imagine they can only see the title. And then, if they're interested in what the title is promising them, they click on it, and only then it reveals the actual content of that slide. Now, with that in mind, think about what the best slide title is for you. And so a lot of people use titles that are boring and generic. They talk about the content that's going to be delivered, but not about the value of the content that's going to be delivered. You want to speak to the value. It's not too dissimilar to how you pick a title for the entire presentation. But again, you want to do that for every single slide or for every single chapter in your presentation. This is very important, and it's a form of attention boosters. Like I spoke before, we had the fluctuation. Every piece of content in your presentation, you want to make sure that the value of that specific chapter is coming through in that title name. And if you're speaking to senior decision makers, you know this. These people are usually very impatient, they think very quickly, and they even jump to conclusions. And that's okay. I wouldn't judge them for that. Think about how many different people are coming to their doorstep and asking for their attention and asking them for resources. Think about how many decisions they have to make and how much uncertainty they're dealing with. So they're sitting in front of you, and they're desperate for time, and they're desperate for certainty, and they want to know, if I'm giving you my time, are you here to give me value in return? When you give your slide the right title, you are in essence telling them, the next 2 minutes you're going to give me, here's the value I'm offering you. And you're doing it all through the presentation. So you're constantly maintaining their buy-in. Okay. I'm going to let you look at this slide for just a minute and think about this for a minute. Do you think this is the right slide? Do you think this is the right way to build a slide? What problem, what common mistake does this format of a slide represent, aside from the fact that there's no title? This slide represents a very, very common mistake that people make by thinking that a presentation is very much identical to a written document, and it isn't. So every single time you see people presenting a slide that's packed with words, then they turn around and they read the slide, in effect giving the audience their back. That's not only crowded and ineffective because you're breaking the nonverbal line of communication you have with your audience, but you're also having the slide compete with you, the speaker, for attention. You don't want that. You want to take a slide like this and turn it into a slide that looks like this. And so what I did here was very simple. I did what everybody does. I took all of the content that I wanted to say and I wrote it down. So far, no problem. Then I pasted it into my PowerPoint. Okay. Then I went and read it all. And I did what most of us do naturally, also when we write an email or a regular document. I highlighted the key sentences or the key words that I felt were most important, and I put them in bold. You see, we have a natural, innate understanding, an intuitive sense that we have to prioritize content when we're delivering too much of it to our audience. So we put it in bold. But in effect, what we've done is we've already indicated ourselves, we've admitted that the stuff that isn't in bold isn't as important. And if it's not that important, take it away. If you want, you can speak to it verbally. So 3 steps that you want to conduct when you have an overloaded slide with text. Number 1, identify the keywords. Number 2, put them in bold. And number 3, and I know this can be painful, erase everything else. Now, if you're sitting there saying, yeah, but then they won't understand. If I were looking at this slide, Ariel, and you weren't here to speak to it, I wouldn't understand what this slide means. Good. You shouldn't. This slide is not for you. It's for me. At best, it's for you to help emphasize the words that I'm saying verbally. So I can say 100, 150 words about the slide, but I'm only going to put 5 or 6 words on the slide. A presentation and the slides that are included in it are primarily for the benefit of the speaker. They're there to help you remember the logical sequence you want to talk in, the specific facts that you may not remember by heart, a quote, And of course, to emphasize the things that you say by singling out the most important words and having the audience read them, but never in a way where they have to break their attention from you in order to focus on the slide. Now, you might notice at the bottom of these slides, in some of them, it says use access code PR2015, and there's a link. You're going to get a copy of this presentation, and when you click on this link, it will also take you to some short training videos that zoom in to some of the tips that I'm giving you. Okay, so if my slide is less crowded, what that means is I have more real estate available to me on every slide. What should I do with that real estate? Very simple. Use visual elements. That is one of the most important benefits of using a presentation as a teaching aid. It can do the one thing you can't. It can paint with one picture 1,000 words. And so while you are speaking, you're using visual components to illustrate and emphasize what you're talking about. This is where you want to invest in the most accurate and most representative and most impactful visuals that speak to the key ideas that you're relating to. The more correct visual elements you use, the better. You will not regret it. You can't overuse visuals if you're picking the right ones and if you're only emphasizing your key messages. Okay, but what happens when my slide is crowded, not because there are a lot of words in it, but because there's a lot of statistical data included in the form of a table or a pie chart, right? You may be asked to show those kind of slides. They are inherently crowded. What should you do? And the answer is you should use forward framing. Forward framing is when you tell your audience about the next slide before you show the slide. And why is that important? It's important because when the eye first lands on a slide, it tries to decipher it. And I should have mentioned this when I spoke about the power of visual stimulation. We know today that the brain responds, wait for it, 60,000 times faster to a visual stimulation than it does to text. They actually did an experiment where they drew words on a wall, and every word was the name of a color, yellow, green, red, blue. Only the trick they did was they used different colors to write the words. And then when they said to people, I'm going to show you a few words, read them as quickly as you can, people ended up reading the color they saw, not the word that was actually written in that color. And so anytime there's a visual stimulation, it's going to steal your audience's attention away. When it's a complicated visual stimulation, like a table or a graph, you're going to lose their attention for a short amount of time as they try to decipher what they see. And so what you're going to do is you're going to tell them what they're going to see in advance. In the next slide, I'm going to show you a picture of a man standing in front of a whiteboard looking at a lot of different diagrams. The purpose of that slide is to show you how to deal with crowded slides. And then you click on the button and you show them the slide. And even then, you decipher the slide for them, just like I did earlier on when I said the y-axis is, the x-axis is, you're looking at, and now let me tell you the meaning of this content. That is very, very important. And last but not least, talking about eye contact. Eye contact is always very, very important. And there are all kinds of ways of maintaining it. But I want to focus on the use of eye contact specifically when you're called to present to other people through a virtual format. This is all the more difficult. Now, what I'm doing through this entire presentation is I'm gazing at a white dot of light on my screen, which is my camera. What I'm not doing is this. I don't know if you can notice the nuance difference, but right now I'm looking at my own slide and talking about it, or I could be looking at my camera as if it's you. A lot of times you'll see on Skype the other person, and you talk to that person. You think you're giving them eye contact because you're doing what you do every day. You're looking at the face of the person talking with you. But that's not how it works when you use a virtual format. You want to make sure you always look in the camera because it's hard enough to maintain your audience's attention when they're not in the room with you. When you're going through a medium like the one I'm going now, you don't want to make it harder by breaking away one of the most important aspects of maintaining attention, which is eye contact. So these are the key tips we wanted to give you today. We have one more chapter to talk about, but I'll leave that for after we take some questions from you. So Jennifer, why don't I give it back to you now?
Excellent. Ariel, thank you so much for these amazing tips. Very, very helpful. I want to ask everybody else out there, what are you finding as, what's the single most important tip that Ariel just shared in his presentation? I know for me, we see a lot of these things, especially when you see crowded slides, we get that often, and it's so overwhelming. It's really hard to focus on what is the point, what is the content that the presenter actually wants you to get from the slide. What is the value here? And a lot of times people will read the slide ahead of time and then maybe even leave the presentation knowing that, okay, I think this is how the presentation goes. I have to read every slide and then I'm ahead of the presenter. That's another thing too. And absolutely the last piece for me, I see a few people typing in. That's great. Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing what you thought was the most important tip that you can actually implement into your next presentation. I was going to say the eye contact, Ariel, that you mentioned during webcast is so important. I say webcast, but any kind of virtual training that you're doing or being in front of your audience, it's something else. It really makes a big difference. I know you were very engaged the entire presentation, and it made such a big difference. I felt like you were looking right at me, so I just felt like it was a lot more to engage with there. And is anyone using forward framing? I wanted to find out. Actually, this was, Ariel, when you and I started to go through this presentation in our preparation stages, this was the first time that I'd actually heard that term. And I don't know if it's the same for everyone else. I'm going to take a look at our chat pod here and just see some of these comments coming in just to see what everyone's saying. So, Crystal, thanks for your comment. You're saying your favorite takeaway was making a contract with your title question. Very nice. Thank you. Tara Bisbee is from Cal Poly is saying slide denoting value, delivery versus content. Absolutely. What is basically the translation is what is the value to the participant, right? Versus just what is the content? Yeah.
This is very important. This is a very important comment because a lot of people think, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to think that because you're the presenter, the presentation and the event is about you, right? You're talking, you're in the spotlight, and everybody else is listening to you. But in effect, you should not be at the center of the presentation. The value to your audience should be at the center of the presentation. And that is a paradigm that a lot of people have to change in their head. Even if you're being invited to present about a topic or a project that you're leading, you always want to make that contract by first saying, okay, my audience is investing time in me. What's the value I have to give them? And only then I'll deliver my content in context of that value.
That's right. And I think that kind of goes back to the beginning, too. It's also helpful for us to offer polls at the beginning because we can really find out what are those hot points that are interesting for people. What are people looking for? What's the gap that you're looking to find out from this presentation? So that's where Ariel was so great in really focusing on those needs, those questions. So Kelly, thank you for your comment here, attention threshold. And again, going back and revisiting what that value is for the participant or for the audience every time instead of kind of just going flat. But it's kind of like you said, keep coming back to what the value is, reminding them of that. I thought that was great. Let's see, attention grabber initially was good. You like that? That was great. I like that a lot with Jerry. And let's see, I love the forward framing concept and not starting with a question unless you know your audience. And as you were saying that, Ari, I was going to actually type in, it's kind of fun too, is if you do ask a question, something you can do is even, have a plant out there, plant somebody who's going to actually respond in the way that you want, right? So you can rely on that person to come through for you. Just make sure that they can log in okay, right, if if it is a virtual presentation. All right, and then title slides, excellent. Show value of content, not content, good tip. And then Crystal, thank you. In regards to the forward framing, I use a lot of tables and stats, and I often also let them know where to look in the table beyond what the table will show. I use visuals to help, like an arrow or highlight. Nice. So there's more to read into versus just looking at what's on the screen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's an extremely important point. Absolutely. Every slide, like I said before, has a core value to it, a core takeaway you want your audience to take from it. So when you're showing a table or that kind of data review, you definitely want to have a takeaway which you can put in the title of your slide or as an animated feature that comes on top of it, like a circle or an arrow that says, look here, this is what it means. What you don't want is to give your audience the need or the opportunity to have to read all of that data on their own.
And figure it out on their own and kind of lose lose you, basically, kind of go off on their own.
Exactly.
And then Michael, thank you for your comment. Michael Caldwell here at the CO is saying, academics like words. Do you recommend providing supplemental materials for those who are not good at retaining and or capturing detail? That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a very, very good question. So, a lot of people, and I'll take it a step further, it's very, very common today for people to be asked to send their presentation ahead of time to the audience so that they can review it. And that creates a problem because what you don't want to send all of the content ahead of time, otherwise why are you there? And so here's the solution. What I like to do is I like to send ahead of time a specific file, which is almost like a table of contents that only lists the questions we're going to deal with without presenting the answers. And after the presentation is over, I like to have a thicker, more comprehensive document, and I'm using that word on purpose, document, not presentation, even if it's in a presentation format, that I can share with my audience that will be, every slide can be more crowded, it will have more detail, but the one I present will be lean and mean based on some of the tips I gave today. Now, if your audience wants to have the content in front of them while you're presenting, you're welcome to hand out the printed version of the document you would send them afterwards and give it to them. But just keep in mind that document will be competing with you for attention because some of them may be impatient and may be, flipping through the document and to ahead of where you are. So you might want to say to them, you have in front of you a document that has much more statistics and data, but please let's review it together and I'll walk you through that document as I present. That's definitely an option as well.
Yeah, that's great. A supplemental. And Michael's saying, perfect, love it. Just received an email this morning requesting a PowerPoint for this Thursday's webcast. We will not be giving that out early, right, Michael? All right, well, thanks so much, everyone, for the comments and questions. Keep those coming. We really appreciate your participation. And so, Ariel, I really wanted to find out, we actually piloted How Did I Do here at the studio, your project, your company that we have been talking about. And before I talk a little bit more about that, I'd love you to share about How Did I Do? And this is the tool, everybody, who is the tool that can actually help to measure the impact of presentations and how you can really up your game through professional feedback that's confidential. So Ariel, I'll hand it over to you so you can share about How Did I Do? It's an incredible platform.
So How Did I Do basically was born out of an ambition to break away from a lot of the constraints that we were dealing with as a training and consulting firm, specifically as a firm based out of Israel. Traditional training and consulting is something that happens in face-to-face sessions. So you want to broaden your reach globally. You have to get up on a plane and go there. It's very time-consuming. It's very expensive. That's number one. Number two, when you are a service provider, you're very limited by your actual availability. If I had two clients that wanted me at the same time, I wouldn't be able to address both of them unless I grew as a company. And we did grow, so we have about 80 employees today, but we felt that still wasn't enough. How could we create a platform or a tool that would allow us to provide support and service to people all over the world and in a way that wasn't limited by our availability, meaning we would move from a synchronous dynamic. This is what's happening now with us, that's a synchronous dynamic, same time, same place, to an asynchronic dynamic where you would upload a video of yourself on Monday and we would be able to view it on Tuesday and then give you feedback on Wednesday, something like that. And so we decided there must be a technology that we could create, or first of all, that we could use to do that. And we started looking at different solutions. So obviously you have Skype and you have all these different tools, but they didn't solve everything. They weren't easy enough. So then we came up with this idea of creating an online speaker 360 diagnostic and feedback platform that we would use for our clients. We were very pleasantly surprised when we started realizing that a lot of our clients wanted the tool even without necessarily using us as a service provider. They would use the tool themselves to provide feedback to each other internally. And as they did that, we realized that we were on the path to shattering two very important paradigms in the world of training and consulting. Paradigm number one assumes that the in-person is always at a higher quality than the remote. And that makes a lot of sense. If we were all sitting in the same room, to a degree, you'd probably receive me better. I'd be able to see you and adapt myself to your body language and maintain your attention better than me doing it remotely. However, what we found was that by moving to an asynchronic process, I, the expert, would not be under the gun to listen to my client as she presents and then quickly take notes and then give her feedback after having heard her only once. So that need to respond in real time was a limiting factor in the quality of the feedback that I could give. And even if I were excellent and my brain worked at the speed of light, she would then have the opportunity to listen to me once. I would give her feedback, she would write it down, and that would be the end of it. Now, of course, we could record it, bring in a camera, but that's cumbersome. What we found was with our system, when a video is uploaded to that system and I view it as an expert, I can watch it once, twice, 3 times, take my notes calmly, and then select the feedback I want to give her, where the context of my feedback is richer because now I'm giving her a comment at the beginning of her talk that takes into account something I saw at the end of her talk. That's very difficult to do when you're doing it in person in real time. The second paradigm we discovered that we were shattering was the idea that in-person is always more expensive than group format, right? If you want to give somebody one-on-one coaching, it's obviously more expensive per capita than if you pay for that hour and get 20 people in the room. But with our system now, we discovered it's actually less expensive because people are using the system whenever it's convenient for them. The organization no longer has to spend the same amount of time and money and effort collecting 20, 30 people into one room and then giving them training. They can now give every one of those people training on their own, and because the system is remote and because it's asynchronic, the costs are much, much lower. So let me show you a little bit how this speaker feedback tool works. I've already mentioned that it's based on a very simple process where you can upload a video of yourself presenting, whether it's a friend who recorded you when you were actually presenting, or if you recorded yourself even with your phone at home, or if you even recorded yourself speaking directly into the camera while logged into our system. And then when you submit that video, what you get is a platform that is hosting your video where I can now watch it wherever I am in the world, whenever I am in the world. I'm going to be traveling tomorrow from the UK to the United States. I'm going to have 3 hours in the airport. I will probably give people some feedback during that time. And the way I'll do it is I'll have the video of the individual in the center of my screen, and I can do it through my phone or through my iPad. And then as the video plays, I can click on that purple button called Add Feedback at any point. And by clicking on that button, it stops the video in that moment and opens up a feedback form that will end up looking like the following slide. That feedback form will say to me, Ariel, what do you want to say about whatever it is you saw in the video? And I can add, I can score. As you can see on the top, right under the video, there is a scoring process, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I can add an image that relates to something that I'm talking about. In this case, by the way, you're seeing a snapshot of a feedback that was given by one of the national heads of training of Dior, a cosmetics firm, giving feedback to a beauty consultant as she engages with a client in the store. So that's an incredible use case we hadn't thought about in advance. So he decided to add an image relating to a product she had offered. He then wrote some text. He could have also added a video of himself talking to her about that specific piece. So now what you're left with at the end of the feedbacking process is not only a video of yourself so that you can actually see yourself on camera, which is a huge value of closed circuit television and training processes, but usually very time-consuming and expensive for the trainer. In this case, it doesn't take any time or money. You can see yourself. The video will stop every few seconds, and you can see it's a bit hard to see here, but right underneath the video player, there's a timeline, and there are little icons that are posted on that timeline. Every one of those icons is indicating that there is feedback to be received in that point in the video. So again, let's go back to that face-to-face in-person training process. When you're sitting in front of somebody and presenting, they don't want to interrupt you every 2 minutes as you present. So they listen to you for 10, 20 minutes, they write notes, and then they give you feedback. But the problem is, you don't see yourself on camera, you're at the end, and they might say, remember what you said in your third sentence, and you're like, yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. Here you get to see yourself in that moment, and then you get to consume the feedback. So this is how it works. Obviously, if you use it more than once, you'll end up having something we call a video timeline, which allows you to see how how your improvement has been happening from time to time. Another very important factor in this system is privacy. You know, a lot of people are uncomfortable going through training in a group format and getting critiqued in front of everybody else. Sometimes you have audiences that, you know, there's a certain culture in the organization and you don't want to be seen in your weak moments. Here it's just you and the person giving you feedback, and that person could be anybody that you choose. And so privacy is another very important value here. Last but not least, we are currently developing this system in a way where hopefully the machine itself will be able to give you feedback. We've already done a successful trial run at a very basic level, but ultimately the computer will listen to you and monitor the words you used, the tone of voice that you used, speed in which you spoke, your movements, your eye contact. It'll measure who interrupted who in a conversation and give you analysis that you can then use to share with an expert who will then give you feedback on that, or it will automatically trigger tips and recommendations by the machine about how you can improve. So that's a little bit into the vision of this platform. But currently this platform is up and running, and I'm happy to say that every one of you will also have an opportunity to use this platform if you choose to. So with that in mind, Jennifer, why don't I give it back to you again?
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ariel. So yes, as Ariel just mentioned, we're happy to offer this free trial account. Actually, it's coming obviously straight from Ariel and his team. All you need to do to set this up for yourself is contact on the screen there Mr. Omri Avisaf at that email there, and you're going to be getting 3 30-minute videos with very personal feedback, as Ariel just went through. And this is a pretty amazing tool. It's the very first that we've seen, and so we were really excited when you brought it to us, Ariel, to work with our presenters here in the studio for webcasts primarily. And so we've actually seen some really great results with it, and we've just been using it for a short time so far, and we're about to roll this out on a larger scale to all of our webcast presenters here, and also remotely, in fact, too. So really looking forward to expanding it. But we're excited about this, and we hope that others will be joining and trying this as well. So let us know in the chat pod here if you'll think you'll be joining and trying, I say joining, but trying this free trial offer. And what are some of the most important tips that you'll be taking from today's presentation again into your next presentations? And who will be providing the feedback, David is asking. Thanks, David, for asking that.
Yep, that will be us. You will be able to ask other people for feedback if you want to. We'll set up an account for you where you can upload your video, and you'll see from the interface, which is very simple and friendly, that there's an option there to get feedback from other people. All you have to do is put in their email address, share the code with them that you used to create your own account, and they will automatically be given access to the system to provide you with feedback. But in the very least, you will get feedback from us, which means this free trial doesn't only include setting up an account for you, it also includes getting 3 feedback sessions from my company on the videos that you will upload.
And it's very easy to use. We've been using it, as I mentioned. Very easy. It's just a couple clicks, and your video is uploaded, and you get an email saying that your presentation feedback is ready. And the most important thing, or one of the really nice things about this tool, which you already mentioned, Ariel, is that it is confidential, and it's not being critiqued kind of in a kind way in front of your colleagues. It's confidential, so it's between you and a third-party professional presenter who's giving you professional feedback. And it's not just on your body movements and maybe your tone of voice, but it's also about your presentation as well. Some very specific things you can do in your slides, things that may help just to bring you into a more effective way of presenting. So we're really excited about this, and you'll be seeing more of this. Our presenters here will be seeing this as an option for them if they'd like to use this as well. So Ariel, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us all the way from London today. We're really glad you could be here with us and share these important tips. So I want to open it up again. We have a few more minutes here, about 9 minutes or so before we wrap this presentation, this webcast. So if we have any questions, any comments, and folks who are on the line with us today, you're welcome to unmute by pressing *6. We'll be able to hear you. Come on with us. So Ariel, if you have any other comments you'd like to mention, I see a few people
Sure.
typing in here too. If there's anything else you'd like to share as we begin to wrap up.
Absolutely. I think I'll share one last recommendation, specifically because it got such a high response rate at the beginning poll that you ran. A lot of people are very, very preoccupied with the challenge of presenting to senior decision makers. I will give you one more recommendation that wasn't included in this presentation, but that addresses that challenge directly. The idea is very, very simple. Anytime you're presenting, you have to look at the content that you're presenting not as the what are we talking about, but rather as the how are we talking about. And I know that can be confusing, so let me clarify. When you're standing in front of a senior decision maker, it's on you, as you prepare for that event, to create a very, very clear and direct link between whatever it is you're going to be talking about and one or more of the core business or operational strategic objectives that they are currently staying up at night trying to address. So that means you have to know what they're focusing on. And so a lot of times when you get invited to present, I strongly recommend that in the setting expectations process, you ask them, what is the kind of value you hope to achieve from my presentation, and what goals or objectives or even obstacles that you're currently dealing with do you want my content to address? And once you have that information, you want to begin your presentation by referencing those ideas first. So you'll get up and you'll say, after you use the grace period, right? We now know that we need to use a grace period. You have their attention. You show the presentation title. And then the table of content in your presentation should include a clear reference to one or more of these objectives or one or more of these obstacles. So you'll say, today's presentation is about how we can improve X, or how we can overcome Y, or how we can ensure Q. And these three letters each represent something that they care about, that's on their agenda. So what we're talking about is actually the desired outcomes that the audience you're standing in front of is trying to achieve on their day-to-day reality. How to achieve those outcomes is the answer you're going to give them with your content. Hence what I said before about your content being the how, not the what. If you can position yourself and the content that you deliver as the means to achieving the goals that your audience is interested in, or the means to overcoming the obstacles that your audience thinks they're dealing with or is actually dealing with, you will automatically be perceived as an asset to this audience. You will be perceived as relevant, contrary to being perceived as a burden, which is somebody who's taking away my time but not delivering value in return. So that's a
Absolutely.
brief 3-minute discussion about that specific challenge.
Absolutely. And some of the ways to go about maybe finding out what those needs are. Any recommendations on that, whether it's, having conversations prior or sending out a survey or something like that?
So this gets divided basically into two channels. One channel is the direct channel, and if you have the luxury of having access, a good relationship with that individual, you might want to sit with them once a year, once every quarter, and say, I'd love it if you could share with me the key aspects that you're currently focusing on. You need to avoid a trap. Sometimes people will tell you what they're working on, but it won't truly be of value. The best example I can give you is when I do these seminars, I ask people, I'm going to give you a wish. I'm a genie in a bottle, and you can get one wish from me. What would you like? And what people ask me for is time or money or some other form of resource. That's not a desired value. That's a desired resource. What you want to do, if that's the case, is you want to say, wonderful. And if you had this resource, how would you use it? And what would be some of the measurements of success having used it? Those measurements of success, those success metrics, they represent the end value that individual wants to achieve. And then you might go on and ask, well, what are some of the obstacles that you feel currently are standing between you and those desired outcomes? and now you have the answer. Now, if you don't have direct access to that individual, then you want to start accessing people who do have access to that individual. Ask people who are around that person, and if you're one of them, start paying attention. These people send out emails, they hold staff meetings, they sometimes have town halls and give presentations themselves. Pay attention. You will find patterns in the areas that they're focusing on. Those areas will be a good indication to you about what they're thinking about, what's currently taking up their time and attention. That's most likely what you want your content to be connected to.
That's excellent. That is such a key takeaway right there. To be relevant is pay attention. What are those success metrics and what are the obstacles? I think those are, for me, those are so key today. So thank you so much. What a great way to really wrap up the presentation. And yeah, like Robin's saying, what's in it for me from your audience's perspective, from their viewpoint? Thanks, Robin.
Exactly. That's 100% right. Well, listen, I want to say a big, big thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this webcast. And of course, on this slide that you still have with Henri's contact details, there are also my contact details. You're welcome to stay in touch. And I put a link to my Facebook where we constantly upload content and videos. So hopefully that'll continue providing value to people.
Excellent. Well, that's really, really helpful. And while we're kind of wrapping up, we talked a little bit. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tara. You're getting some amazing feedback here, so thank you, Ariel.
My pleasure.
We talked a little bit before when we were prepping for the presentation today, but some tips even on how do you end a presentation? How do you kind of wrap it out? And yeah, I'll send it back to you on that one. What tips do you have for that?
Right. So the grace period, which is the tool that I presented with which you should open a presentation, is also a great tool to close a presentation with. Generally, we know from psychology that people have a stronger memory of the first moments and the last moments of an experience, not just of a presentation. So what you want to do is you want to use the opening grace period to create a very powerful first impression at the beginning, and then you want to close with a story or a quote at the end. And if you can use a closing grace period that comes full circle with the opening grace period, that'll be perfect. That'll show your audience that every component of your presentation was considered and that you really did build here a whole that's worth more than the sum of its pieces.
Nice. It's like bookends, basically.
Exactly.
Beginning, middle, end, kind of bring it all together. Yeah. Well, excellent. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I do want to remind everyone on the top left of your screen, you're going to see a PowerPoint. It's actually a PDF for you to download, and it was, as Ariel was mentioning earlier, it's a little bit thicker with information than the PowerPoint that you saw today, because with that, you're going to take it away and use it as a resource. So there's a little more text on the slides you'll see, but it's a wonderful resource full of the tips that Ariel mentioned today and shared with us. So Ariel, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate this this opportunity to have you on today, so thank you. And everyone, want to thank you for your engagement today, your participation. Thanks for joining us on this Friday in the middle of December. We're going to be having more CSU's Got Talent coming up starting in February is our next one, so keep an eye out for that. And also, if you have a presentation on your campus you'd like to share, a presentation that you know about, maybe one that you gave or someone else gave, we would love for you to let us know so we can highlight it for the entire system here from System-Wide Professional Development and really highlight your campus for sharing it. So you can email me, jwicks@calstate.edu. I'd love to hear from you. So with that, thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Happy holidays. We want to wish you the very best. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again soon on another CSU's Got Talent. Take care. Have a great day.